What's up, guys? Welcome to this special episode of The Sat Signal. Today, we are joined by Dominic Frisby, who is a very famous guy in the Bitcoin world. I met Dominic at Bitcoin Prague when he was speaking on the main stage. He is the author of 4 books, a huge gold bug who found Bitcoin and really transformed his way of thinking about Bitcoin as a core asset in your portfolio. He's an extremely smart guy. He's a comedian. He's famous as a projectionist as well, and quite the rebel. He projected all kinds of hilarious things onto the sides of buildings in the UK to get his point across. He's a larrikin. He's a thinker, and just a really interesting, good guy. In this interview, we talk about how his journey of Bitcoin came to be from being a massive gold bug, how he talks to people who are still convinced that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value as somebody who owns both, which is really, really interesting. And we also, at the very end, talked about the world today and the race that is on between Bitcoin and gold from a geopolitical point of view. I think you'll find it super, super interesting. And we were just very lucky to have him for the time that we did. He only had 40 minutes to spare with us, so this episode's a bit shorter because he had a meeting to get to in London. But if you do enjoy this, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. The subscribes that you add make it easier for me to get great guests like Dominic on. So enjoy this one, guys. Bye for now. Dominic Frisby, so good to have you on the show. It was an absolute pleasure seeing you in Bitcoin Prague take the stage and get us laughing and learning all at once. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Adam, and thanks very much for having me on. Pleasure to be here. Pouring with rain here in London. It's been a beautiful summer, and then I speak to you and it starts raining. So
yeah. Well, you know, that's London. I'm going to be up there in a couple of weeks, so hopefully we can turn the weather, and I'll bring some of the Cyprus weather up for you, mate. Get some sunshine into you. So, Dominic, you know, I'm super interested to talk to you because you're a fascinating person. Like, I've read all your background. You're author of 7 books. You're a comedian. You're a musician. You've done so many interesting things in your life. But maybe you could just tell the audience your journey to Bitcoin. Like, a lot of our audience and they're learning Bitcoin. You know, what got you to Bitcoin? And you had some terrific comps to gold, which I want to dive into as well, because I know that you're a gold man originally.
Yeah, I was a gold man. We were trying to raise money for this project in 2005, 2006, something like that. And my dad had a little bit of money, and I was reading things on the internet, and I was like, Dad, you've got to put it in gold, you know, fiat money, it's going to collapse, all of this. I was just reading so much interesting stuff. And so we invested in gold. And then I started this podcast as a means to talk to all these interesting people who were going on the internet. And one of the people I spoke to offered me a job as writing for her magazine, which is a magazine called Money Week. And so I became the gold writer for Money Week. And in fact, I've just now written a book about gold. Anyway, so I was kind of quite vocal about fiat currency and all that kind of stuff around about the time of the financial crisis. And I wrote a film which was extraordinarily popular called 4 Horsemen. It got like 11 or 12 million views or something on YouTube. And there was loads of, you know, fiat money stuff in that film. And people just used to message me, go, you need to take a look at this thing, Bitcoin. You need to look at this Bitcoin. And in those days, people would just send you Bitcoins, whole Bitcoins. And then while I was writing the film, 4 Horsemen, and while I was writing my first book, Life After State, and in fact, if I'd gone to Bitcoin conferences instead of writing those stupid books, the Bitcoin price was going nuts. And I remember I looked back at my emails. The first time somebody ever emailed me about Bitcoin, it was 20 cents, 22 cents, December 2010. And I remember it's just like all those emails, you know, you read it and go, oh, that's interesting, and then move on to the next email and don't spend any time on it. Anyway, this was now we're fast forwarding a couple of years, and Bitcoin was on its sort of epic bull market when it went to $1,200, same price as an ounce of gold for the first time. And then while that was happening, I started writing a book about Bitcoin called Bitcoin, the Future of Money. And I think it's like the first book on Bitcoin from a recognized publisher. And so that's kind of the process by which I got into Bitcoin. So through gold.
Yeah, I mean, you've been around this space for a long time. I don't think you'll remember this, but when I got and met you were signing books in Prague, you were laughing with a guy in front of you and you said, that guy there paid me in Bitcoin a number of years ago for one of my books, and I just laughed out loud thinking you said he paid you in a few Bitcoins, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh my god.
One guy, he gave me, it was a bit more than the cost of a book, but he gave me 6 Bitcoins, which would be like, £750,000 now.
Incredible for a book. One thing you said,
wasn't even a first edition. Didn't even have my signature.
And I said to you, what does he think of that? You laughed it off and said, he's an OG. He's got plenty more Bitcoins. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to, you opened your speech in Prague and you gave this magnificent riff on why gold is so special. And I'm always getting bombarded in my comments on our show, The Sat Signal, because we just talk about Bitcoin with gold bugs who are so pro gold and anti Bitcoin. I'm like, guys, we share so much common ground. In my view, Bitcoin's just the same moral crowd with better technology. I'd love to hear your take on it as somebody who really deeply understands gold and its sacredness and it's part of the universe. I'd love to hear that riff for our audience.
Sure, no problem at all. The first thing I would say is we're both on the same team.
Yeah.
And this ludicrous, and I think a lot of gold bugs are just bitter that Bitcoin has done what everyone said gold and silver would do. So there's a little bit of, and because gold bugs have been in this fight against fiat, if you like, and the fight for sound money for so long, and then Bitcoin's just kind of come along, and a lot of them were late to it. So there's just a lot of resentment going that way, and then in reaction to that resentment, Bitcoiners are just like, Bitcoin's better than gold, and look at the price, look at the practicality of it, and all of that. But the differentiation, there's two things. One is a generational differentiation. So people who are over maybe 60 years old just tend to like gold more. And maybe the under 50s tend to like Bitcoin and cryptos more. And the sort of 50 to 60 are sort of a bit of both. But I'm just own both. We're both on the same team. They both have a huge strategic role to play. And I think year on year, actually, gold bizarrely has actually outperformed Bitcoin over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
a rare occurrence. But I think what is important to understand is that at the moment, digital technology is way, way, way more practical than physical technology. So we no longer use pens and paper, we use Microsoft Office. We no longer use records and CDs, we use Spotify or whatever it is. We don't read physical books in the way that we once did. Digital is just more practical. Records, bonds, stocks, everything is digital now. But digital technology has only been around since maybe, I don't know, the 70s or something. And Bitcoin is a digital technology. It's broken the digital bearer asset problem. It's the first person to solve this thing of double spending, and that you can give somebody something that is digital and has value in and of itself. And that's the incredible breakthrough of Bitcoin. But it is, so it has all the so that's why in the short term, if there was a sort of showdown between gold and Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin is likely to win because it is just the more practical of the two. Like I've just written this book about gold, and the things that people went through to hide their gold from the Nazis in World War II. It's extraordinary. There were just these chases with tons and tons of gold on lorries all across Europe in every country the Nazis invaded. Just so impractical. But gold is, you cannot destroy gold, as I'm sure you know, and it has been around. It was created either by divine creation or interstellar collisions in outer space. It doesn't really make much difference. And it was in the dust which formed the solar system, which eventually formed the planets. And because you can't destroy gold, that therefore means that little bit of gold. So I'm holding up a gold sovereign here. I'm holding it up to camera. You can see it looking nice and shiny. And that's the old pound coin. And it now takes £650 coins to buy the old pound coin. But this bit of gold is not just older than the Earth itself, it's older than the solar system. And when you go, what is eternity? And you imagine what is eternity? It's this sort of ethereal, spiritual. No, that is eternity. This inert metal that never changes. So that lifeless. It's the most lifeless thing there is. It's the most analog asset there is in the whole world. This little bit of shine, it never loses its shine. It was shining before the solar system was formed, and it's still shining now. And it's this most incredible creation, this most incredible metal. But it is an analog asset. It is the most analog asset. And Bitcoin is a digital asset. And there's loads of crossover between the two in the Venn diagram. They're both stores of wealth, maybe not as good medium of exchanges as they are stores of wealth, but they can be used as a medium of exchange. They will be fantastic units of account. They're both money in and of themselves, but one is digital and one is physical, analog. And so when you get into this argument as which is better, you're effectively having an argument. The argument effectively is which is better, physical or digital. They both have their uses. And that's why I say own both. And so I know the internet likes you to take sides and be the gold guy or the Bitcoin guy or the left-wing guy or the right-wing guy. But in this case, I'm an extreme in the middle and own both.
It's so unfashionable, Dominic, to be in the middle of anything these days. You've got to be polarized to the edges.
Yeah.
So what do you say to somebody who is just a gold bug to help them get off zero? So how do you explain Bitcoin when they say it's got no intrinsic value, it's just got nothing, gold is real, it's physical? Like, what do you say to those people? What's the Dominic Frisby orange pill?
I'd just say go to an exchange, open an account, buy 20 quid's worth of Bitcoin, buy your mate on the other side of the world a cup of coffee, and send him £2 or £3, enough to buy a cup of coffee, and just get started that way, and then get him to send you enough to buy you a cup of coffee, and just get started, play with it, explore it. And everyone who does that is orange pilled. Just start using it. Yes. What is this resistance to sending £20 to an exchange and just buying £20 worth of Bitcoin? It's just that little step, and so many refuse to do it. Once you send 20, you can send 100, then you can send 1,000, then you can send 10,000, and then your Bitcoin will be worth 10,000. So on.
So do you do both in your life? So do you have a Bitcoin stack that you spend? Obviously, you have a Bitcoin stack that you hold and hodl. Do you have a Bitcoin stack that you actually transact with on a daily basis, or how do you run that?
Not on a daily basis, but I do. I have a Lightning wallet, and I do use it. If I'm trying to, so I went on GB News, a TV program once a couple of years ago, and the presenter was saying exactly what you told me. Oh, I keep hearing about Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. So I just literally gave her £1 worth of Bitcoin on air. And so she had her first Bitcoin. So now there was no excuse. She's now 5 years later, she's saying to me, I still haven't bought any Bitcoin. I was like, I gave you some on TV 5 years ago. But anyway, so I used Lightning for that. And if I'm at a conference or something and people are accepting Bitcoin, and for internet, I'm just trying to raise money for a project at the moment, and we need to raise 100 grand, and that some of my investors are sending money from the States, and it's just so problematic sending money from North America to the UK. Why is that so difficult? And yet, so I'm just, a lot of the time, I'm just going, if only there was an international peer-to-peer currency where we didn't need to actually walk into the bank and some people have remitted in Bitcoin for this thing, and it's just so much easier for international payments. Yes. And I follow this guy, Bitcoin Wales or whatever his name is, on Twitter, and every day there's like so-and-so transferred $1.3 billion worth of Bitcoin from wallet X to wallet Y, and it cost him whatever, £5 or something. And then I was able to send 1 sat. I sent using Wallet of Satoshi, I sent a payment at 1 sat, which would be like 1/20th of 1p. And, in many ways, the implications of being able to send a payment of 1 sat are greater than the implications of being able to spend 1 billion, but they're both huge. And just my answer is just use it and stop being an obtuse, objectionable, stubborn fool, because it's costing you, every day you ignore it, it's costing you money.
I watched a terrific video this week about TradFi person who finally flipped. Sorry, TradFi person who finally flipped. And
Soft fi, I think you mean.
what's that?
You said hard fi, and I think you mean soft fi.
No, I said TradFi.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay.
and, he,
Sorry.
and he said, anyway, he said that, it was interesting because we often say in the Bitcoin community that Bitcoin is an IQ test. And he said, I disagree with that. It's actually an ego test. And because he said it's so difficult when he said, I got into Bitcoin when it was under $1,000. And he said, it's very difficult for many of my peers to come in knowing that it's now 100,000. They just can't sit in the same restaurant with me without feeling incredibly stupid. What do you say to people who are looking at Bitcoin, and in your view, where are we even at 108 or 109 or 110,000 as we interview today? What are your thoughts on that, or what do you say to people when they feel that they're too late, they've missed the bus?
I'd never thought about it, Adam, in those words as an ego thing, but that's exactly what it is. And I've been thinking a lot about ego generally in the last few years. I was with a girl and we split up, and she just did a couple of things and it really upset me. And then I was just sat there, I was talking to my mum, and I was going, I know she wasn't right for me. So, and I know it had to end. So why am I all that? And then I just realized it was my ego. And then I was watching that argument between Zelensky and Trump a few months ago, you might remember. And I was watching that, and Vance got involved. And I just thought, all that is just clash of egos. That's just literally clash of egos. And then I started thinking, probably every great war in history is probably just the ego clash of the two main leaders. And I just realized that ego is everything. And, a lot of the spiritual, Christian spirituals, Buddhists, whatever, they talk about getting rid of your ego. And it's so important. And Bitcoin does that. Like, I remember one of the reasons I didn't buy more significant amounts sooner is I was watching it, and in these days it had gone from $1 to $2 to $4. I can't buy it after it's doubled. Yeah. Imagine if I had bought $10,000 worth at $4. I'd be so rich. I'd have the biggest ego in the world. But I probably would have sold it too soon. Lord knows what would have happened. But so much of it is ego, and I think that's one reason why so many people they can't bring themselves to do it, because it involves swallowing their ego. And this goes one stage further, Adam. Like, even with the Bitcoin ETFs, Bitcoin is still shadow banned by the major institutions. And if you look at, I've got a list of, if you look at the major banks that own the gold ETF versus the major banks that own the Bitcoin ETF, if you look at the banks that own the gold ETF, it's Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and all the rest of them. And if you look at the ones that own the Bitcoin ETF, on a relative terms, it's just pirates. It's much smaller funds. And so, the thing that Kennedy had during the just before the financial crash in 1929, when he got advice from his shoeshine boy, and he was like, if my shoeshine boy's giving me tips, that means it's time to get out of the market. And retail is normally the last person in to any particular market, and the institutions get in first. Bitcoin was the total opposite of that. Retail got in first and the institutions got in last. And the institutions have never forgiven it for that. They haven't been able to get over their egos. Those big banks have not been able to get over their egos. And even now, with the US president and Vance and everyone going, all in on stable coins, Genius Act, all the rest of it, Bitcoin, yada, yada. There's a sort of quiet shadow ban of it going on. And it is ego. It is nothing more than ego. And it's just stupid. And do you know what? Your ego is costing you. Get over yourself.
Yeah, I see it all the time, you got some of these incredibly bright people, you got the sailors of the world that are basically borderline geniuses, and you've got
authors. He's not borderline genius. The man is a genius, and he got over his ego. Yeah. He's cross with himself because he was buying it at $10,000 or something.
Yeah. But people are listening to their Uncle Dave, who's got no money, who tells them, you're right, the Bitcoin's a scam or it's too expensive. And you're like, people are a lot smarter than you are buying this as much as they can get, but you're sticking to your story and your ego and your '86 Honda Civic on finance and getting.
Michael Saylor is a genius, and I think he was already a billionaire before he got into Bitcoin. One of his strengths, you listen to him talking about what's going to happen with Apple and Google in 2013 and so on, you realize that he can see technological trends coming. And I imagine he was long both of those stocks and made a great deal of money. I don't know, but one assumes he did. And, even for someone that sees technological trends with the clarity that he does, he was slagging Bitcoin off in 2013, 2014. And then he came to it during COVID and he was like, and so he got over his ego and went all in, and then realized, oh my goodness me, I've got something here, and created the Bitcoin Treasury Company model. And do you know what? It really wouldn't surprise me if within as little as 5 years, but probably 10, Michael Saylor is the richest man in the world. With the amount of strategy stock he owns, that is a distinct possibility. If let's just assume, I don't know, I'm totally guessing, but I think he was already a bit billionaire. I don't know how much strategy stock. Do we know how much strategy stock he owns? It must be published or something. But let's just say he's worth 5 or 10 billion now, which I imagine he is. What's Elon Musk worth? 300 million? So he only needs, his net worth only needs to go up by 10 or 20 times or something, and he's ahead of Elon Musk, maybe 30 times. But strategy can do that quite easily. Plus he's got all his Bitcoins and blah blah blah. There's a very real chance that man becomes the richest man in the world.
Yeah, he's extremely bright, and I think for everyone listening, guys, if you don't like your financial results in life, start looking to intelligent people. And I've started to figure it out that quite often the best business move is not to start a business, it's to find the Elon Musks and the Michael Saylors and give them your money and let them, just follow what they're doing, as you got a decent chance of success.
There is, and there are also very good books written by people who aren't mega millionaires about their mistakes, and you can learn quite a bit from those as well.
So tell us about your latest book, Dominic. Like, you've written 7. Tell us about this latest one.
I've written 4. I don't know where you got that.
I must have got it wrong. Yeah, inflation. We must have written on fiat dollars.
Yeah, I've been printing books.
The printing books, yeah. Sorry, mate. So tell us about your latest one. I know it's got a terrific title. So let's go through what you got in there.
It's The Secret History of Gold, and it was the logical next book for me to write. I've written one about tax, one about Bitcoin, one about why we need less government, and so on. And it's published by Penguin. It comes out this week. We're in the final week of August as we speak. In the UK, Australia, it comes out in the States next year. And I just talk about the incredible history of gold. What an incredible metal it is. How it's a metal of. So there's a great story. Like gold has inspired people to do more things than any other substance on earth. Maybe food and sex are the 2 biggest motivators, and after that it's wealth. Gold is pure wealth. And people have done incredibly brave things, gone into the unknown, exploration, innovation, invention, everything from alchemy to exploration science, in trying to get more of this metal. We would not have California were it not for gold. We would not have Australia were it not for gold. We would not have South Africa were it not for gold. South America would not be what it is without gold. Just entire civilizations have been built on the back of gold rushes. And so I talk about the incredible effect of this metal on the human psyche and on history. And it's not all positive. Like pretty much every gold story of rags to riches ends up back at rags again by the end of the story emotionally. There's a story about a man who boarded the ship with all his money, a bag of gold, and then the ship sank and the cry came, what do you do when you abandon ship? And so he tied his gold to his waist and jumped overboard and sank to the bottom of the sea. And the line is, had he the gold or had the gold him? So there's a contradiction there. People have done amazing things in the name of gold. They've also done the most terrible things you can possibly imagine. We have death, war, slavery, environmental destruction. All sorts of terrible things have happened because of this quest for gold. So it's it's just, it's in our myth, it's in our folklore. Everything from the Lord of the Rings to Jason and the Argonauts to the Trojan War was a war effectively over a golden apple. It's just in our psyche. It's the very first metal we ever used. Long before we used copper or iron or anything like that, we were finding little, Stone Age man was finding little gold nuggets and wearing them around his neck and giving them out as a reward and prize and all the rest of it, using them as a tool of barter. And then you look at gold in the world today, and there is an argument that just as the gold was natural money, the horse was natural transport, then we invented the car, we didn't need the horse anymore. You could say the same about gold and digital technology, but gold will be around long after digital technology is obsolete. That is one thing that's for sure. So in the very long term, gold will outlive Bitcoin. Maybe in our lifetimes, Bitcoin might outdo gold, but in our children's lifetimes, gold's going to win that particular one. But today, if you look at when the world was last on a gold standard in 1970, roughly 27 to 30% of all the gold in the world was held by central banks. It's the same now. Even, gold isn't official money anymore, but we still hold it as reserves. Corporations use it to store wealth, individuals do, and central banks still do. And you look at Chinese accumulation of gold, and China overtook South Africa in 2007 to become the world's largest gold producer. It's also the world's largest gold importer by a mile. It is not allowed to export any gold by Chinese law. It can't export its gold. So all this gold has been making its way to China, and it just hasn't been honest up front about how much gold it has. It's been totally understating its gold reserves. And the world's just gone, oh, yeah, China's got 2,000 ounces. No, it doesn't. It's got more than 10,000 ounces in the state. Never mind private hands. China has more gold than America does. And in any case, it doesn't matter if the gold is owned by the state or by the individuals. The gold is still in China. And China is the most important industrial country in the world. It's the factory for the world. It makes everything. And it's going to be the most important political power in the world, along with the United States, over the next 20 or 50 years. And the fact that it has been accumulating such extraordinary amounts of gold, and it was on the other side of the trade when Gordon Brown sold his gold in 1999, shows you that gold is an incredibly important strategic asset in this day and age. Even if it's a silly old boomer's analog asset, it's still incredibly important strategically and politically and so on. And so it's going to have a big role to play. It's still quietly there underneath the machinery of modern finance, and it's going to have a huge geopolitical, financial, strategic role to play in the future. And I talk about it all in The Secret History of Gold: Myth, Money, Politics, Power.
Guys, get the book, because this is the kind of stuff, this education is so critical to holding any asset at all, but it's the education that enables you to hold through thick and thin and up and down. So Dominic, with that in mind, like when you got kids, right? So if you were talking to your forum, so if you were talking to kids that are going through those wealth creation years, let's say their early 30s through to their 50s, what allocation do you tell them to split between gold and Bitcoin? How much Bitcoin, how much gold?
Well, I have in my newsletter, The Flying Frisbee, we have a thing called the Dolce Farniente portfolio, which means Dolce Farniente is Italian for the sweetness of doing nothing. And the idea of this portfolio is that you don't need to look at it. You might reallocate once or twice a year. And we have some energy in there. We have a lot of equities. We have some gold. We have some Bitcoin. And it's more designed for slightly older folk than it is for people in their 30s. And we've been running this portfolio for years. And really, Bitcoin is the ultimate Dolce Farniente asset. You just own it, and you literally do not need to do anything else. And so if you're young, I would recommend being overweight Bitcoin. But in the portfolio, we're 15% gold and 5% Bitcoin as a starting point. But that's because people aren't comfortable allocating more than 5% of their wealth to Bitcoin when they don't really know it yet. But we allocate that as a starting point. But what's happened in the portfolio is that 5 and that 15% have grown way overweight relative to the rest of the portfolio. So that, like in my case, I've probably got more than half of my net worth in Bitcoin, but so it just grows and grows and grows, and we don't keep shaving it back so that it stays at 5%. So that even though that might be your starting point, 5% Bitcoin, 15% gold, because of everything that's going on in the world, and we can talk about that in a sec if you'd like. It's quite interesting. I've just written an article about it, so it's in my head. But that 5 and 15% are likely to grow much bigger.
Yeah, it's interesting when people say, rebalance. It's kind of like saying sell the winners and buy more of the losers. I'm like, no, dude, just like hang on to the winners.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that, because I know you're on a tight schedule. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes left. Where are we in the world, Dominic? Let's hear it.
Okay, I'll tell you. Now, Adam, you said something very wise just about when you were talking about my book, and you said educate yourselves because that helps you to stay long. I really believe in, if you really want to ride out a bull market. I remember going for lunch once with this fund manager, and he started telling me about this company that he'd invested in, and he was just a sort of traditional old English fund manager, all like that, but he was so passionate about this company, and it makes these widgets, and they're just these most fantastic widgets, and it's got XX market share, and you just thought he understands it so well, and he's so passionate about it, that is going to enable him to stay long. And you really, part of riding out a bull market and not selling too early really is indoctrinating yourself. It's like a diet. You're not going to do a diet properly unless you're totally indoctrinated as to the benefits of the diet. And part of that is seeing other people who've done the diet and how it's turned their life around, so on. And so, it really, indoctrinating yourself is, the problem with that is if you over indoctrinate yourself, you lose your cynicism and you don't get out at the top.
That's true.
But it is still really important. It's an important thing of this is why Bitcoin's almost like a religion, because so many people are like, believe in it so strongly, and that's one of its strengths. Anyway, that's just the psychology of riding out bull markets. So America, we've got Trump, Besant, and Vance, and they've all said we want to reshore, we want to get, we want to prioritize Main Street, never mind Wall Street. We want to get America building again. Tariffs, weaker dollar, we're going to get industry back to the USA. But that is about so much more than the Rust Belt. The curse of having the global reserve currency is that, it used to be called America's exorbitant privilege. It could just issue $100. Everyone else had to work for $100. But the problem with that is it means trade deficits with the rest of the world, when you have the reserve currency, are inevitable. And so inevitably, and then people make their money and then they reshore it back into American capital markets. So you have the financialization of America. Meanwhile, it's inevitable when you're running trade deficits that industry will go elsewhere, which is why, industry's gone to China where it's cheaper and so on. And during COVID, America was caught with its trousers down. So many critical, essential goods, protective equipment and all the rest of it was just revealed how dependent it was on Chinese supply chains. Then the war in Ukraine comes along, and it's revealed just how much of America's military equipment's being made in China. And you're like, are you insane? You can't do that strategically. You can't have your military equipment and your tech and your IT made by somebody who is likely to be your enemy at some point in the future because they're your biggest global rival. This is insane. And so the Biden administration did not seem to get this, but the Trump one does seem to, particularly Vance. And Vance has actually said that America's reserve currency status is a tax on American producers. So it's not just championing the Rust Belt. There is this thing is strategically, we have to get industry back to America. Otherwise, we are vulnerable. So, but it can't do that while the dollar is the reserve currency. Mm-hmm. So it is slowly managing the decline of the US dollar as the global reserve currency, as well as its value. It is slowly doing that. It's happening organically anyway. China's been reducing its holdings of US treasuries since 2013, but its holdings of US dollars haven't declined. They're still at around 3 trillion. So but it's slowly allowing this reset where the dollar is no longer, it's sacrificing, if you like, its status as reserve currency in order to get critical manufacture back to the US. But there's no other national currency that is a viable alternative. The euro, please. And so what we've seen is the resurgence of gold, and all the buying that's gone on since America confiscated Russian dollar assets. It's been by central buying. It hasn't been by retail. Normally, retail drives bull markets. This bull market's been driven. That's why the miners were laggard for so long. It's been driven by central banks. Every pullback to the 15-day moving average has been bought. And it's central banks, particularly along the Silk Road, that are on the other side of the road, the trade. But gold is a neutral asset, and it actually suits both the US and China for gold to resume its status as this sort of reserve asset. So gold holdings by central banks have doubled in the last 10 years, and we've overtaken the euro. Gold has now overtaken the euro, and meanwhile, the dollar's come below 50% for the first time. There's just this gradual thing of gold going up and the dollar coming down. And it suits the US because the US has shed loads of gold, assuming the gold in Fort Knox is there. It suits China because China has shed loads of gold. If gold gradually gets, if they revalue the US gold holdings, they're currently valued at $42. If they revalue them at 3,300, whatever the gold price is now, that's 950 billion US dollars that America suddenly has that it didn't have before, gets it out of the fiscal hole it's currently in. Revalue similarly, gold. Chinese own so much gold, it helps China boost its domestic markets, which it needs to do if it's no longer manufacturing for the US to quite the same extent. So it suits both for gold to resume this asset, to resume this role. And it's sort of quite a peaceful, it means there isn't a rivalry between the yuan and the dollar. It's kind of a peaceful solution, if you see what I mean. Also suits Russia because Russia's got loads of gold. Suits anyone who's got lots of gold. But so we're seeing this process. Now, obviously, we've just had the Genius Act in the States where the states have made CBDCs, they've nixed them, just as the EU is bringing in its CBDC later this year. So I find that really funny because Americans go, no, we're not doing CBDCs. But it's championing stablecoins. Now, as the Bitcoin market grows, the stablecoin market grows. The stablecoin market's roughly thought to be $250 billion at the moment. And stablecoins are currently 50% held as US Treasuries. Tether is the 7th largest holder of US Treasuries. And so, but this market's predicted to grow much bigger. Like it's 250 billion now. One prediction is 5 billion by 2030. Sorry, 5
trillion.
And another one is 4 trillion, and another one is, so it's markedly higher than it is now. So the decline in buying by foreign central banks of US Treasuries will to an extent be offset by the increase in buying by stable coins of US Treasuries. And also this new kind of market for money, if you like, or this new network for money means the US dollar has a significant role to play there as well. So it kind of keeps its status, but it loses its status at the same time. So, and it suits America if Bitcoin becomes the reserve asset. It suits America because it has more at a country level, it has more Bitcoins than anyone else. At a corporate level, thanks largely to Michael Saylor, but also all the other companies, it has more Bitcoin than anyone else. And I think 15 to 20% of Americans now own Bitcoin. On a personal level, probably it has more Bitcoins than anyone else. So there's a lot of Bitcoin in the US. So it suits America if it ends up being Bitcoin and not gold. And in fact, if the gold isn't in Fort Knox and that where is the audit, that hasn't happened, that really suits America too, because it'll be able to go, oh, well, we haven't got the gold, but Bitcoin, that's much more important. So at some point, we're not there yet, maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now, you might see this rise of both at the moment, all roads lead to Bitcoin and gold. And then there's going to be this showdown between Bitcoin and gold. Which wins, the analog or the digital? The timeless or the futuristic, the modern? There's arguments for both. In the short term, I rather suspect Bitcoin wins because of its practicality, but in the long term, some new technology will come along and it'll be better than Bitcoin, at which point gold becomes a thing again. But at this point, it doesn't matter. Own both. And then in a year or 3 from now, it'll become clearer which is going to be the winner in this sort of the international reserve asset showdown. But that's what's going on. And it's a big shift. It's 1971, 1944, Bretton Woods. It's that kind of level of significance, this shift that's taking place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In the world we live in now, it's trustless makes the most sense. A reserve that's neutral makes the most sense. And I think there are only two fighters in that ring. You know,
they're both bearer assets. They're both bearer assets. You don't need anyone else to confirm how much they're worth. Their value is in and of themselves.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say on that because I don't have a depth of knowledge in gold that you have. I just have a lot of knowledge in Bitcoin. So it'll be very interesting to wait and see. And for all you gold bugs out there, I hope that your mind is not too blown, that you have somebody here who absolutely knows a lot about gold and also owns Bitcoin. And I think the magic word there is ego management. And, you know, Dominic probably wants to be rich more than he wants to be right. And I think that's a really powerful place to come from.
I'd much rather be right.
Dominic Frisby, thank you for joining us, mate. I know you've got to run into the city and I know you're a busy guy, so really appreciate you coming in. Guys, if you've enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and go and get Dominic's books. They're amazing. You can get them on Amazon, I'm sure, around the world. And, you know, give him a follow as well. Have a look at his newsletter, Flying Frisby. I'm in his email list. So great content, comes out very articulate, and get yourself smarter by getting around smarter people. Dominic, thank you for joining us. Really
Adam, it's a real pleasure, and thank you for coming up in Prague and saying hi. And you know, you're a great guy, and you're doing a great job. And it's a real pleasure to be talking to you again. And I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Absolutely, thank you, mate. Bye for now.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.